What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video we're going to be taking this other piece of the feather pattern Damascus that I made a while ago, and if you didn't watch that video, be sure to check it out. It was probably around a month ago. And we're going to take this guy and we're going to be doing another feather pattern Damascus knife, but this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to flip the pattern around and do it the opposite way that I did the original one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grind out all the cracks and make sure they're nice and clean and they're out of the way. That way I can keep my billet from ripping anymore whenever I forge it. I do have a persistent centerline crack that goes throughout the entire billet on one side but not on the other, so after grinding it a little bit and not being able to get it out of there, I decided to just leave it there. And I go on ahead and heat my billet up, get it nice and clean, and I flux the crap out of it, trying to make sure that any little hairline cracks that I have, like the center one or anything else, I can make sure to get forge welded before I do any more major forging on it. And back into the forge we go to get it up to forge welding heat, and I'll give it a couple even squeezes to make sure all that gets welded. After we get a nice solid weld, I'm going to start dividing the steel, that way I can get my tang portion and my blade portion. As of late, since I have the guillotine cutter thing that I use with the press, I use that to create the separation between the blade portion and the handle portion, and it's been working out pretty well for me. So after I have my two portions separated, I'm just going to go ahead and forge it down. Once I got the tip rough forged with the press, I'm just going to refine it with the hammer and give it a little bit more of a curve. The press does work well on moving the big steel and the thicker steel, but it doesn't do as well as pushing it to certain different directions, if that makes any sense. It's going to push it evenly top to bottom, side to side, but it's not going to be able to force it one way versus forcing it the other. So I have to do that with the hammer and the anvil, and after I have that set up, all I have to do is start thinning out my steel, making sure I have enough for the width and the length of my blade. For this blade I'm going for about a 2-inch heel, and as long as I can get it, which in this case is about 8 or 9 inches. I ended up partitioning quite a bit of steel for my handle, so I ended up with a bit of extra steel. Still definitely enough for my full tank construction that I wanted, but it ended up being a little bit extra, but it was no biggie. I just ended up cutting that off whenever I finished my forging session. A lot of the forging and shaping to this piece is pretty straightforward. All I'm doing is, after I get my preform, I'm stretching it out, and I want to give it a little bit of a drop point, but not too much. It's just gonna be a long chef's knife, I guess. The first knife that I made from this billet was a smaller feather Damascus knife. It was, I believe, around 6 and change on the blade length, and I had turned the pattern around, and not the traditional way but the opposite, and so I decided to do this one the traditional way just because I wanted to see what it looked like, you know, the difference. And overall it was a pretty good forging session. I left the tip of the knife pretty wide, and that is because I don't know exactly where my feather, the center of my feather, actually goes. So to be able to get it roughly where I needed, I decided to leave it wide enough to where I can shape the tip to make sure the point is roughly where I want it. And that's just strictly for aesthetic purposes. And I mean, it's gonna look better, so it's definitely worth wasting the extra little bit of steel and the extra little bit of grinding that goes along with that. So with my knife fully forged out, we're profiling it on that 2x72 grinder, and I'm just taking an old worn out 36 grit belt, and I'm just hogging off a whole bunch of material, not really worrying about overheating the blade since it's still in its annealed form. It's no big deal, so right now is when I'm hogging off as much material as I can. I do end up really liking the shape of this knife, so let me know in the comments down below if you like the shape of this knife. Alright guys, so I couldn't resist and I put it into the acid to make sure that the pattern came out right. It's looking pretty good. The pattern is slightly off towards the tip, but not really, because the grain opens up, so it doesn't look bad. And I kind of like the way the knife is situated as is, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And I'm going to drill my holes and get it ready for my heat treat. I'm going to heat treat it fairly thick, and then I'll just do my final grind on it once it's hardened. But so far so good. I'm liking the way it looks, and that feather is beautiful. So if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know that my old drill press was having problems. It ended up breaking down, and I didn't really have time to fix it or order the parts, so I ended up buying this smaller one. And we're going to be using this guy until I get the other one up and running. So we are out of the temper. We had a solid, successful heat treat, and may I say that pattern is looking gorgeous in there. So next up on the to-do list, we're going to surface grind it to get back to nice clean steel and do our finish grind. Let's get to it. Man, I must say, I do really enjoy having a surface grinder attachment for this 2x72. If I had more space, which I wish I did have, and hopefully in the near future I will have, a bigger area to work in, I would definitely like to get like a standalone surface grinder. That'd be pretty cool. But for now, I really enjoy using that guy because it just makes cleaning up the knife a lot easier, and it saves a lot of time, which is very crucial for me to be able to make these videos and get them out on time. So I really appreciate that, and the investment was definitely well worth it. Now all I need to do is find something that can grind these knives a lot faster and a lot easier for me. Then I would be a very, very happy camper. But until then, I have to grind it all by hand. But at the same time, I am grateful that I was born in the era that I was born, and we have all these cool machines to be able to help out and make the process a lot easier and a lot faster. So yeah, I'm definitely grateful for that. Also, if you're watching this video on the date of its release, it is my birthday, so be sure to wish me a happy birthday by liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you're not subscribed, I'd appreciate that. And on to hand sanding. Though I do have a hand sanding machine that I ordered that will hopefully be put to use in the upcoming videos. That would be pretty cool to learn to get around and learn how to use. And hopefully cut a couple hours off of making these knives. So we're going to move on to the handle now that the knife has been hand sanded. We're going to be working on our handle. So I have these two pieces of stabilized maple burl. I'm going to be using them for my handle scales, as well as I will be adding on an extra black liner that I will be putting in between. That way I can etch without running the risk of damaging my handle or having it, soak in any kind of weird aromas from the coffee or the acid etch. And I get around doing this by putting a layer of clear nail polish and making sure that that layer is nice and dry and it covers everything. And I just use the liners as a in between for the steel and the wood. I know the wood is stabilized, but I don't want to run the risk of it getting any kind of weird aroma. It is still a natural wood, and so those pores on the inside could still try to absorb a little bit of that liquid, and I don't want to run that risk. So that's the way I do it. I don't know if other people do it or how they do it, but if you go around and do the same thing, that way you have your etch all around the spine, be sure to let me know in the comments down below how you do it, and maybe I can learn a better way to do it where I don't have to waste all my time trying to get all that nail polish to cover it evenly. And using those nail polish brushes is an absolute pain. I don't know how people paint their nails with that, but that's besides the point. Now we're going to move on to our handle, which is just a standard glue up with our West System epoxy, which works like a charm as always. And we have our fully dried handle here the next morning. I really like to add those black pins with the black liner just because it accents very well, and I think it looks pretty cool, but that's just my taste and the way I look at it. Let me know in the comments down below if you like the combination of the black liners and the black pins, or for example, if I use some orange liners and some orange pins, you know, let me know in the comments down below if you like that. I think it's pretty cool, but it's also not for everyone. I've had people tell me that they prefer the more look of natural woods, which I also agree. I like the look of natural woods as well, but I also like blues and the greens, so I like to, make some handles out of different colors because I think it looks pretty cool. But I do also appreciate just some regular natural wood colors, and definitely on a Damascus knife like this one, I think it looks a little bit better, but I wanted this handle to be similar to the one from the other knife, so I definitely went that route instead. And I don't think I had any good materials in my storage to, do this knife justice. So once all our handles are shaped, we're gonna move on to our etching process. And I'm not gonna lie, the reveal was great, but unfortunately, due to shadows and stuff, you can't see it very well. But man, that coffee etch brings the contrast of the blacks and the whites. It just pops it out a whole nother level. So I definitely do love the look of some coffee etch steel. And with the knife essentially finished and waxed, time to move on to our sharpening, which I do it all on the machine. Sometimes I go for stones, sometimes I go for machine, sometimes I go for diamond discs. This time, it really just depends on the amount of time I have to work on it. This I literally did like 2 hours before I started editing, so I decided to go for the quicker method. And here is the finished product. I think it looks very, very nice actually. I think I did myself this time. This guy came out looking great, and I really like the look of the pattern, even though it has those little spots where instead of having those straight lines, it changed up a little bit and gave it more of a open pattern, if that makes sense. But I think that gives it a nice little handmade touch and appeal. Overall, I think it looks great. Let me know in the comments down below. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.